Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Frame of Mind, which is episode 21 of season 6 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is a part of Star Trek Week, where I review one episode from each of the 5 Star Trek series with the theme of episodes that I like that everyone else seems to hate. This review is where I cover the Next Generation episode Frame of Mind. So Frame of Mind is the episode that begins with Riker rehearsing for a play where he plays a mental patient who has committed a murder who is being interrogated by his caregivers. Meanwhile, he prepares to go on an undercover mission on a planet where the legitimate government has been overthrown and is in a state of total anarchy, and the Federation diplomats are in danger from certain factions that would use them to gain power. However, as time goes by, things get stranger and stranger as Riker finds himself starting to feel like he's going a bit insane. Next thing he knows, he's in a mental institution talking to a Dr. Cyrus who insists his time on the Enterprise are nothing but delusions. After spending some time as a mental patient, Riker finds himself back on the Enterprise where everyone around him tells him his time in the mental institution was just a dream. However, his visions persist, and while he's performing the play, he sees a man sitting in the audience whom he also saw at the institution, and he totally loses it. Crusher and Troy insist he just needs to get some rest, but when he tries to, he experiences a series of disturbing visions and then finds himself back in the mental institution. This time, Dr. Cyrus warns that he needs to make progress, otherwise he may go to prison or have an invasive surgery performed. So they try something called reflection therapy, which convinces Riker that he is insane and that the Enterprise is nothing but a delusion. Later, Data and Worf beam down to rescue him, but he thinks they're just delusions and tries to fight them, but they manage to get him back to the Enterprise anyway. Once there, he experiences more visions, and nothing seems to make sense, so he takes a phaser and shoots himself, but as soon as he does, he appears back in a mental institution with the man who he's been seeing at both locations, whom they refer to as Suna. Suna insists he has succumbed to his delusions and thus will require the invasive surgery, but Riker is still holding the phaser, which Suna insists is just a knife, until Riker shoots someone with it. He then uses the phaser set to a high setting which should vaporize most of the building, but when he uses it, he suddenly finds himself back on the Enterprise performing the play with Suna, and every time he yells at Suna and refuses to listen to him, the audience cheers, where suddenly he has a breakthrough and wakes up on a table with Suna doing an invasive procedure. Riker knocks out a guard and grabs his communicator to order a transport back to the Enterprise. There, they inform him that Suna was a member of a faction trying to forcibly extract intelligence from him, which his mind was fighting off, which is why he experienced those delusions. Riker then tears down the set to the play as he can't sleep, knowing that it's still up. So, to say this episode is an episode that I like that everyone else seems to hate isn't entirely accurate for this episode. It would be more accurate to say this is an episode I love that some people hate. When I did my top 10 episodes of The Next Generation video, where this was number 6 on my top 10 list, I received several comments stating that not only should this episode not be on my top 10, but also that it belonged on a bottom 10 worst episode list. In fact, out of the nearly 20 top 10 episode videos I've done, this episode was the one I received the most negative feedback about, so it gave me the impression that a lot of people hated this episode. However, when I checked IMDb, this episode has an average score of 8.3, making it the 33rd highest rated episode on the site. And 33 out of 179 actually isn't bad. However, on the site, there are 9 fan reviews, 8 of which are very positive, but there is one that gave it the lowest rating possible and stated that this episode was just stupid. So it does seem to me that it's mainly just a vocal minority that hate this episode, but those who don't like this episode really don't like this episode, stating that it is one of the worst of the entire series. And to be honest, this reaction really took me aback, because when I first saw this episode, I saw nothing but positive reviews on this episode, and all my friends and family, everyone I knew, also loved this episode and thought it was one of the best. This episode aired during the second half of the 6th season, where I personally felt the show hit a stride and was on a roll, airing excellent episode after excellent episode. However, in retrospect, some of these episodes don't hold up quite as well as they used to, as I personally feel the episode Suspicions is one of the worst Next Generation episodes, and the episode Aquiel, which I used to love, now seems a really silly and subpar episode. However, most of the episodes like Chain of Command, Ship in a Bottle, Face of the Enemy, Tapestry, and this one I still absolutely hold up and are some of the best of the entire series. And if anything, I appreciate this episode even more than I did when I first saw it. And it does make some kind of sense that there is a segment of the fan base that have reacted very negatively to this episode, as it is extremely different in tone and in execution to most episodes of The Next Generation. But to be honest, that's the main reason why I love it. I would describe this episode as being very similar to a David Lynch film, as it has that same mind-bending dark style to it. Brenna Brega, who wrote this episode, cited being influenced by the 1971 Roman Polanski film Repulsion. I personally have never seen this film, so I can't speak to it, but to me it reminds me of a Lynch-style film like Lost Highway or Mulholland Drive, where the majority of the story takes place inside someone's head, and it's about their own subconscious trying to tell them something. Lost Highway is one of my all-time favorite films, and when I made a very, very modest short film for a local arts festival, and actually followed the same format of the majority being in someone's mind while their subconscious tries to tell them something. So the reason I bring this up is to point out how much this type of story really appeals to me, but I understand it may not necessarily be everyone's cup of tea. Now, that doesn't mean this format always works, as Star Trek has tried this format several other times that, in my opinion, resulted in horrible failures. Some examples I can think of is the Deep Space Nine episode Distant Voices, in which Bashir is trapped inside his mind while he's dying from a telepathic attack, and he's growing old at an alarming rate while those around him are behaving strangely. This one was a bit too on the nose with its metaphors, and thus I'd say ended being quite mediocre at best. Or the Voyager episode Coda, where similarly Janeway experiences hallucinations while an alien virus tries to kill her. These visions involve a time loop where she repeatedly dies. This episode, in my opinion, was a horrible, contrived attempt to capitalize on the success of Frame of Mind and Cause and Effect, and it fails miserably. And then there's the Deep Space Nine episode Extreme Measures, where Bashir and O'Brien go inside Sloane's mind to extract information. This episode was kind of undercut by the fact that we knew we were inside Sloane's mind, as did the characters, and I found the metaphors used here to be a bit clunky. However, in Frame of Mind, they got the formula just right, as instead of coming off as too gimmicky as those other episodes did, this episode actually put you inside Riker's head as he went on this journey. And part of the way it accomplished this is by having the device of insanity be the tying theme to the episode. This episode, like no other TV episode or film that I've seen, really puts the viewer inside the mindset of someone who is going insane, and it does it extremely well. There are some films like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and As Good as It Gets that accurately translate what it's like to interact with those with mental disabilities. However, what this episode does is correctly translate what it's like to lose one's mind. And again, I compare it more to a David Lynch film like Lost Highway or Mulholland Drive with its dark and twisted tone. I remember when I first watched this episode that it really freaked me out and disturbed me much more than any other Star Trek episode has before or since. You genuinely felt the scariness of what it's like to lose your mind, but also to be held in a mental institution against your will, where you have people like Mavak, who's just a bully and an asshole to you, and people like Dr. Cyrus, who's just very patronizing with a superior tone and false pretense of trying to help you. But really, you get the feeling that he's against you. And the way that Riker would switch between the Enterprise reality and the mental institution reality really helped create this sense of reality bending, that Riker had no idea what was real and what wasn't. And that scene where Riker was walking down the corridor of the Enterprise and started seeing visions from the hospital, like the other patients saying, "Don't let them tell you you're crazy," and then seeing him freak out and run down the corridor until he suddenly finds himself back in his cell and screams, "Let me out of here." That was one of the most scariest moments I've ever seen, and I found that really disturbing, and that is a testament to how well it was executed. This combined with the subtle clues that both states of being were entirely in his head, like the cut on his forehead that keeps reappearing no matter how many times they heal it. We then learned that this is because in real life, that's the spot on his head where the real Suna has his device hooked up to while he is trying to abstract information from Riker's mind. And that wound reappears more towards the end as Riker starts to figure out what's really going on, as well as the fact that Suna is the only one who appears in both fantasies, indicating he is the main adversary he needs to overcome. You can also draw metaphors through other devices, such as the phaser Riker uses to tear down his reality, being an instrument of his subconscious that his conscious mind latches onto to discover what's really going on and to fight Suna's invasive procedure. And of course, at the end, while he's at the play with Suna, and the more he pushes him away and refuses to listen to him, the more people in the audience cheer. I absolutely love that. That was amazing. And this was, of course, his subconscious mind cheering him on because he was starting to realize what was really happening and to fight this procedure, which allowed him to wake up. These were all metaphors that were used beautifully well, as it is relatable in real life. When one dreams, external factors are often interpreted into the dream, just like Riker's head wound was, such as when you sleep on your arm and it falls asleep, you can dream that your arm is injured, or if you get a bad headache while you're sleeping, you could dream that you hit your head. And these are nice touches that really sell this episode and make it feel like an actual dream rather than a fictionalized version of what a dream is, which we often see on TV. The structure of this episode is crafted beautifully well, as it begins pretty straightforward and things just get more and more crazy and out of whack as we go, building to a final conclusion that I thought paid off in spades, as all the rules of reality are just thrown out the window. When Riker shoots himself, he just ends up in a different location, and when he shoots someone else, they shatter like broken glass. And the ending where his whole reality shatters is simply amazing. Another great aspect of this episode, of course, is the acting. I'd say this is the one episode where Jonathan Frakes' acting skills were really put to the test, and he recalls this being one of the most difficult episodes he's ever had to do, and one of his favorites. I think he does a pretty damn good job, as it's sometimes difficult as an actor to play a character who is acting, but I think it really works well here, as you can tell the difference between when he's acting in the play as someone who is crazy to when he actually is going crazy. The disturbing scene I mentioned when he was screaming, "Let me out of here," only works because Frakes really sells it and makes you believe that he's going crazy. And the ending performance where he fights Suna was also brilliant, as you buy the journey he's been going on. However, that being said, there are certain aspects to his performance that are a bit too much, such as when he sees Suna in the audience at the play for the first time and charges towards him and says, "Who are you?" This is something my brother and I used to make fun of a lot, because it seems very mechanically that he sticks out his lower lip after saying it, kind of like this. "Who are you?" So it does seem to make the performance a bit less realistic, but on the other hand, it is an iconic and memorable moment from the series as a whole. So now let me get into a few minor nitpicks that I have about this episode. The first one that never sat right to me is that the real Suna simply left Riker's items next to the table in which he was being examined on. So all Riker had to do was wake up and grab them. Oh, and by the way, one of those items was a freaking knife. So what kind of idiots are they to simply leave a weapon right there for him to take? Now, granted, the communicator was disguised, so they might not have been aware that it was a communicator, but regardless, it seems very careless of them to just leave his personal effects right next to the table where he's being operated on. At the very least, you think they put it in a different room. And for that matter, why not put restraints on him in case he does wake up and try to fight his way out? That seems like a glaring oversight to me. And the other thing is that Riker's whole mission and purpose for going there in the first place was to rescue some Federation diplomats who were in danger, and yet no mention of whatever happened to these diplomats. They're probably on similar tables, undergoing their own personal hell, while Suna and people like him try to abstract information from them that they can use against the Federation, but no one seems to care about them. Picard's just like, oh, well, we got Riker back now, so that's all that matters. Fuck those diplomats. But of course, I'm being a bit harsh. Maybe they did rescue the diplomats, but didn't simply mention it. But seeing how this was Riker's entire mission and main purpose for being there in the first place, you think that they'd at least mention to him, oh, by the way, we rescued those diplomats that you were meant to rescue. You know, you think that's information that he might want to know. Anyway. So my rating for Frame of Mind out of 10 is a 10 the best. This is an absolute unique gem in the Star Trek lore that does an amazing job at translating what it's like to go insane and is a mind-bending journey inside one's mind while their subconscious is trying to alert them to what's really going on. And in my opinion, it is just as effective and disturbing as some of my favorite films like Lost Highway, which to me makes this one of the best episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation. So that's it for my review of Frame of Mind. Be sure to check out my channel for the rest of Star Trek Week as I continue to review episodes with the theme of episodes that I like that everyone else seems to hate. And also be sure to check out my channel for many more Star Trek videos, as well as many videos on other shows like Game of Thrones, Vikings, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all that. Thanks a lot for watching.